begins on this Tuesday, October 29th, here on the Korean Peninsula. North Korea's troop transfer to Russia also reportedly includes its generals, who may have already been deployed to battle zones in support of the Kremlin's warfare against Ukraine. Meanwhile, the U.S. hammers out a final framework of restrictions on American individual and institutional investment in Chinese artificial intelligence, computer chips, and quantum computing. And here on the local front, the Kia Tigers beat the Samsung Lions on the baseball ground to win their 12th Korean Series title Monday evening. We start with details from a closed-door briefing to lawmakers by intelligence officials here, who touched upon the likelihood of North Korean generals being deployed to battlefields in support of Russia's warfare against Ukraine. Our correspondent Kim Jong-sil has the latest.
The National Intelligence Service has given its latest update on North Korea's troop deployment to Russia. In a closed-door briefing to the National Assembly Intelligence Committee on Tuesday, the NIS reported on ongoing troop transfers to Russia, including the potential movement of senior officers to the front lines. Additionally, the NIS noted that officials from Russia and North Korea met last week to reconcile differing views on the deployment issue amid growing international criticism.
We believe that a Russian government special flight which travelled between Moscow and Pyongyang on October 23rd and 24th carried a key Russian security official involved in discussions about North Korean troop deployments.
Vice Chairperson Lee added both Pyongyang and Moscow, quote, virtually acknowledged the deployment of North Korean troops to Russia after this visit. The NIS also disclosed that Russian forces have been teaching over 100 military terms to North Korean troops, terms such as on your mark and fire. However, reports indicate communication problems as many North Korean soldiers are struggling with the Russian language. The NIS also warned of possible upcoming provocations by North Korea.
North Korea is preparing to launch a new reconnaissance satellite, reportedly resolving technical issues from a failed attempt in May with assistance from Russia. While the situation remains fluid, there are indications the North may consider its 7th nuclear test after the U.S. presidential election.
North Korea and Russia are reportedly also ramping up economic cooperation, especially in minerals, with covert deals likely to bypass sanctions after signing a new partnership treaty in June. NIS estimates that over 4,000 North Korean workers have been sent to Russia this year. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
Seoul and its counterparts in the West, including Washington, continue to closely monitor the military collaboration between Moscow and Pyongyang as thousands of North Korean troops look to join Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Our senior correspondent Oh Soo-young reports.
South Korea and the United States say North Korea has sent at least 10,000 troops to Russia to fight in Ukraine, as NATO also warns the soldiers could quickly advance to the front lines of the biggest conflict in Europe since the Second World War. On Monday, Pentagon spokesperson Sabrina Singh said Pyongyang has sent about 10,000 troops to Russia to train and fight in Ukraine within the next several weeks, a significantly higher number than the 3,000 estimated by the White House last week. Singh said some North Korean troops have already moved closer to Ukraine, appearing to head for the Kursk border region, where Russian forces have struggled to push back against the Ukrainian incursion. She also said if the troops enter combat, there would be no limits on the use of US-provided weapons. The spokesperson's remarks came just hours after NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte confirmed that some North Korean units were already in the Kursk region, deeming the development a significant escalation. Rutte had been briefed by a South Korean delegation of military and intelligence officials in Brussels, who said the deployment of North Korean soldiers has been speeding up, with Kim Yong-bok, a high-ranking army official close to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, also sent to Russia. The first deputy director of Seoul's National Intelligence Service, Hong Jang-won, said since the disclosure of North Korea and Russia's military cooperation, it appears the two sides are working impatiently to move an estimated 12,000 troops, with some already dispatched to the Kursk region. President Yoon on Monday held a phone call with the NATO Secretary General, saying he hopes NATO will strengthen its solidarity with Seoul and increase efforts to monitor and block illegal exchanges between Pyongyang and Moscow. Rutte thanked the South Korean leader for swiftly sending a delegation of military intelligence officials to brief NATO member states on the situation and expressed hope to keep sharing battlefield-related information and coordinate response measures. Yoon also talked on the phone with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, warning North Korean troops could move to the front lines at a swifter pace than anticipated. He called for the immediate withdrawal of North Korean troops and an end to the collaboration between Pyongyang and the Kremlin, warning that South Korea would actively implement countermeasures. Meanwhile, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky warned North Korea may soon have as many as 12,000 soldiers in Russia and called for weapons and a clear plan to prevent North Korea's expanded involvement. So far, Russia has neither directly confirmed nor denied that it is hosting North Korean soldiers, but has said it is up to Moscow and Pyongyang on how they implement their new security treaty reached in June. The US Pentagon says the North Korea-Russia axis is likely to be discussed when South Korean Defense Minister Kim Jong-un meets his US counterpart Lloyd Austin on Wednesday in Washington, D.C. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
North Korea's top diplomat, meanwhile, is in Russia amid mounting international criticism over the regime's deployment of troops to aid the Kremlin's war in Ukraine. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji has more.
North Korea's foreign minister, Choi Sun-hee, has visited Moscow for the second time in 6 weeks. The North State media KCNA said Tuesday that she left Pyongyang International Airport on Monday without further elaborating how long she'll be in Russia or the purpose of the visit. Che visited Russia last month to take part in a global forum, and she also traveled to Moscow in January, where she met with Russian President Vladimir Putin. South Korea's intelligence agency said in a parliamentary session on Tuesday that Che is believed to have held talks on sending more troops to Russia.
North Korean Foreign Minister Choi Sun-hee went to Russia on Monday, October 28th. The National Intelligence Service believes there were follow-up discussions regarding additional troop deployment and reciprocal measures, so it's utilizing all available resources to find out the details of these talks.
Experts also say that Che likely discussed or plans to discuss the specific details of North Korean troops in Russia, such as where they'll be stationed, what they will get in return, and how Pyongyang and Moscow will jointly respond to criticism from the international community. And it's widely believed that she's expected to hold talks on Kim Jong-un's possible visit to Moscow to meet with Putin.
Since Putin visited North Korea in June, Kim Jong-un will likely visit Russia in return. And if that's the case, Kim's visit to Russia could happen in the first half of next year, after the U.S. presidential election. So it's likely that the North Korean foreign minister will have candid discussions on these issues.
Last week, Kremlin spokesperson said there is a possibility that Kim Jong-un could visit Moscow next year, noting that high-level exchanges are always taking place with Pyongyang as its close neighbor. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
Over in the Middle East, Israel is banning a UN relief agency for Palestinian refugees from operating in its territory, as well as in areas under its control. Our Yoon explains.
On Monday, Israel's parliament passed a bill banning the United Nations Relief and Works Agency from operating on Israeli territory and areas under Israel's control. The UNRWA, providing life-saving services in war-torn Gaza, was established in 1949 to provide humanitarian aid to Palestinian refugees in the West Bank, Gaza, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in a statement about the legislation, reiterated his claims that UNRWA employees are involved in Hamas-related terrorist activities. In response, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres expressed deep concern, stating there is no viable alternative to the UNRWA, warning that the legislation could have devastating consequences for Palestinians. The legislation is set to take effect in 90 days, further jeopardizing an already strained aid distribution process for Gazan civilians. The UNRWA's former General Counsel said on Tuesday that Israel's move represents a broader attack on the UN system, calling for a strong response. The move has also drawn worldwide condemnation from countries including Australia, Belgium, Jordan, Ireland, Norway, Slovenia, Spain, Switzerland, and the UK. World leaders have described it as intolerable, illegal, and nothing less than collective punishment. This decision by Israel comes despite U.S. State Department concerns that there's no substitute for the UNRWA amid the ongoing crisis, and a statement from foreign ministers of 7 countries, including South Korea, opposing Israel's actions. Meanwhile, Israel's attacks in Lebanon are intensifying. According to Lebanon's health ministry, at least 60 people were killed in Israeli strikes on Monday night across 12 areas in Baalbek, eastern Lebanon, including 2 children. Nearly 60 others were reported injured. The Israeli military's offensive in Gaza continues, with reports of at least 7 Palestinians killed in northern Gaza and 10 in the central region. Additionally, reports stated that the Israeli military set fire to a school run by the UNRWA in the Zabalia refugee camp. Since the onset of the Middle East conflict, the death toll in Gaza has surpassed 43,000, while in Lebanon it has exceeded 2,700. Yoon, Arirang News.
Back on the local front, President Yoon Suk-yeol has reaffirmed his commitment to his administration's 4 major reforms, namely health, pension, education and labor. At a cabinet meeting earlier on this Tuesday, he urged officials to dedicate the remaining 2 months of the year to seeking tangible advances in efforts to revamp these 4 sectors. Highlighting healthcare reform as one of the most urgent, President pointed to potential healthcare challenges amid the upcoming winter season and the prolonged collective action by doctors against the expansion of medical school enrollment quota. He also spoke of better support for young caregivers of elderly family members. Today, that is October 29th, marks a grim anniversary here in South Korea. 2 years ago on this day, more than 150 lives were lost during a crowd crush at an alley in Seoul's Itaewon district. Now, in memory of the victims, a solemn ceremony was held at the Parliament today. Our correspondent Shin Ha-young reports.
It's been 2 years since the unimaginable tragedy in Itaewon, where a crowd crush resulted in the loss of 159 lives. To remember those who perished, lawmakers gathered at the Nat'l Assembly on Tuesday, along with about 120 family members of the victims of the disaster. This is the first time the Assembly has officially hosted a memorial ceremony for a humanitarian disaster.
Protecting victims' rights, uncovering the truth, and preventing tragedies are essential steps toward creating a better future. The National Assembly is committed to leading this effort.
Along with the photos of the victims, the walls of the venue displayed a message that said, "We still have names to remember. We will not forget the 159 who tragically lost their young lives." Other memorial ceremonies took place across the nation, including in front of Itaewon Station, to offer prayers for the victims and condolences to their families and survivors. Meanwhile, during a cabinet meeting the same day, President Yoon Suk-yeol emphasized the importance of reviewing crowd safety measures.
안타깝게 돌아가신 분들의 명복을 빌며 슬픔을 안고 살아가시는 유가족분들께도 깊은 위로의 말씀을 드립니다. 관계 부처는 클라우드 매니지먼트를 비롯해서 다중 안전 체계를 점검하고 보완하는 데 만전을 기해 주기 바랍니다.
신하영, 아리랑 뉴스.
In other news, the U.S. has hammered out a final framework of restrictions on American individual and institutional investment in Chinese advanced technology. Our correspondent Lee Soo-jin covers the broader implications of these measures for Korea and more.
The U.S. government's new investment controls targeting China are expected to have a limited impact on the South Korean economy. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy announced in a statement on Tuesday that this was because the rules that aim to restrict American investment in advanced technology in countries of concern only include mainland China and the special administrative regions of Hong Kong and Macau. The rules finalized by the U.S. Treasury Department on Monday local time restrict American transactions involving advanced technology, such as semiconductors, artificial intelligence, and quantum computing that could threaten U.S. national security. The rules, which will take effect on January 2, 2025, are designed to implement President Joe Biden's executive order signed in August last year. The regulations aim to prevent China from enjoying intangible benefits that are believed to come with U.S. financial support, including enhanced standing and prominence, managerial assistance, investment and talent networks, and market access. noting that advanced technologies are fundamental to the development of next-generation military surveillance, intelligence, and certain cybersecurity applications. Assistant Secretary for Investment Security Paul Rosen said the Biden-Harris administration is committed to keeping these out of the hands of those who may use them to threaten U.S. security. The Treasury is also setting up a global transactions office to oversee the new rule, and violators will be fined up to around $368,000 or twice the value of the prohibited transaction, whichever is greater. Moving forward, the South Korean government pledged that it will analyze the impact that the rules have on the economy from various angles, by closely communicating with domestic businesses and experts. One expert echoed the government's assessment of the impact that it will have on Korean companies.
So I think everybody expected the strengthening of restrictions, and most Korean firms, I think, have prepared for this, so they would not have too much problems.
He added that these rules nevertheless indicate that domestic companies will have to be more mindful of exports they make to China in the future. 이수진, Arirang News.
Reservations for COVID-19 vaccinations for babies and children here in the country have begun today. According to health officials, the reservations are for babies who are 4 months old up to children who are 6 years old. The actual vaccinations themselves will begin on November 11th. Now, children will require up to 3 shots, depending on their prior vaccination history. Reservations can be made via phone or on site at a hospital. More information is available on the website of the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency. On the baseball ground, the Kia Tigers beat the Samsung Lions Monday evening to win their 12th Korean Series title. Our Lee Seung-jae has the highlights.
Going into Game 5 of the 2024 Korean Series on Monday, the Kia Tigers had never lost a championship series, with 11 out of 11 previous Korean Series appearances ending in victory. After Monday night's game, Kia made it 12 for 12. Down 5-1 at one point in the game, the Tigers stormed back to beat the Samsung Lions 7-5 to win their first KBO League title since 2017. What made Monday's win even more special was that the Tigers were able to clinch the title in front of a sold-out home crowd for only the second time in their 12 championship wins. The Gwangju-based team now becomes the first professional baseball team to win a Korean Series title in 5 different decades: the 1980s, 1990s, 2000s, 2010s, and now 2020s. While the Kia Tigers boast some of the best power hitters in the league, it wasn't the power hitters that helped them to victory. The 165-centimeter infielder Kim Sun-bin was named the Korean Series MVP after going 10 for 17 in the 5 games. He beat his teammate Kim Tae-gun 46-45 in media voting. While the Kia Tigers' 2024 season started off with their manager Kim Jong-guk getting fired over a bribery allegation, Lee Bum-ho, a Kia Tigers legend himself, took over the managerial role. The Kia Tigers cruised through the regular season, finishing first in the regular season and getting a direct bye to this Korean Series. And with no back-to-back Korean Series winners since the 2015-2016 Doosan Bears, the Tigers look to change that next season and defend their title. But for now, it's celebration time for the 12-time champions. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The pop collaboration 아파트 between BLACKPINK'S Rosé and Bruno Mars has debuted at number 8 on Billboard's Hot 100. This ranking makes Rosé the highest listed female K-pop artist ever on Billboard. BLACKPINK hit 13th place on the Hot 100 chart in 2020 with the song Ice Cream, a song released with Selena Gomez. Meanwhile, 아파트 entered the UK's official singles chart top 100 in 4th place. Meanwhile, the song Hype Boy by New Jeans has been played over 600 million times on global streaming service Spotify. According to the group's agency Adore on this Tuesday, the song from the group's debut album New Jeans became the 4th to hit the 600 million mark after OMG, Ditto and Super Shy. The song Hype Boy was released back in August 2022. Author Hangang owns a bookstore, a small bookstore that has been attracting quite a number of fans following her winning of this year's Nobel Prize for Literature. It has also rekindled interest in reviving such neighborhood stores. Our Yoon has more.
This is an independent bookstore that Nobel Prize-winning novelist Hangang has been running for 6 years, despite it operating at a loss. She selects the books to display, stock, and share with the community personally, and also holds meetings with fellow writers. After her recent Nobel Prize for Literature, it has become a popular attraction.
I heard the news of novelist Hangang winning the Nobel Prize for Literature, so I ran here to congratulate her.
Independent bookstores compete in the shadows of big chain bookstores, but they play an important role in introducing essential books and providing a space for reading groups, as well as preserving diversity in the publishing industry. The challenge is that selling books alone isn't enough to keep the small bookstores from operating at a deficit.
Bookstores that are smaller than 100 square meters are difficult to maintain by just selling books. Owners often also run a cafe or bar business with the library to keep the bookstores afloat.
Taking this into account, one large chain bookstore has decided to limit the sales of Hangang's books to a total of 2,000 books per day across 8 of its branches. Instead, her books will be supplied first to small independent bookstores. This is in response to recent requests for a priority supply of Hangang's books due to fast depleting stocks.
Even if it's temporary, if books in shortage are supplied at the smaller bookstores, it will greatly help revive them. In the long run, we need to discuss ways for the larger and smaller bookstores to coexist.
Hangang's achievement of winning the Nobel Prize in Literature, which led to her books quickly selling out, has created a positive win-win atmosphere for the big chain bookstores and independent bookstores for the first time in a long while. Yoon, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. The United Nations Weather Monitoring Agency, the World Meteorological Organization, says carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere are accumulating faster than any time experienced during human existence. According to Monday's press release by the organization, greenhouse gas levels surged to a new record last year, with carbon dioxide concentrations increasing 11.4% in just the past 2 decades. The WMO's annual greenhouse gas bulletin stated that CO2 concentrations hit a record high of 420 parts per million in 2023, increasing by 2.3 parts per million from 2022. It added that the current level of CO2 is 51% higher than pre-industrial times before 1750. WMO Secretary General Celeste Saulo said that this should set alarm bells ringing among decision makers. With just a week ahead of the US presidential election, ballot drop boxes in 2 American cities were set on fire on Monday morning, which authorities are treating as connected incidents of arson. According to Portland police, an identical car was seen at both scenes, and a similar incendiary device was used in both incidents, which took place in Portland, Oregon, and the nearby city of Vancouver in Washington state. Local officials said that 3 ballots were damaged in Portland, while hundreds may have been damaged in Vancouver. American actor Timothée Chalamet surprised fans on Sunday as he appeared at his own lookalike contest in New York City. The event, which had a $50 prize for the winner, was hosted by a YouTube personality at Washington Square Park in Lower Manhattan. The actor greeted his lookalikes, who were dressed as characters played by Chalamet. The police ordered the group of fans to disperse, which led to 1 arrest, while a $500 fine was issued to the organizers for holding a costume contest without a permit. Kim Seong, Arirang News.
Today, cloudy skies continued across the country. In some Midwestern regions and on Jeju Island, there was some light rain in the earlier part of the day. From tomorrow, clear skies will be revealed nationwide again. For the time being, the daily temperature range is expected to be large, so it's easy to catch a cold in these conditions. Please take care of your health. By tomorrow, strong winds of around 15 meters per second will blow around the southern coast and Jeju Island. You'd better check any items that could get blown away. Tomorrow, Chuncheon, Daejeon, and Daegu will start off at 10 degrees Celsius, Busan 14, Jeju 17 degrees. Highs will move up to 22 in Gwangju, Daegu, and Jeju, Busan 24 degrees. This week, we'll be able to feel the autumn conditions around the country. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up now is our daily panel session. Do stay with us.
Future of high-tech manufacturing industry. This is GFE's Hadong District. We want to connect you to a future of possibilities with our own resources and specificity by connecting spaces to save time and cost. Connecting excellent infrastructure with technology to drive innovation. Opening possibilities by connecting technology with businesses. We will expand our horizons by connecting with the world. There is land that leads to a sustainable future. Daejeon Industrial Complex, a cutting-edge material parts complex, is the best strategic industrial complex in the southern coast region of Korea. Karsaman Shipbuilding Industrial Complex, a shipbuilding and marine industrial plant cluster. It is a global logistics and industrial hub with convenient transportation and high-level accessibility, making it optimal for business investment. Starting from possibilities to becoming a global business hub, from an innovative industrial city to the center of high-tech future industries. It's the beginning for the future. Linking together, making tomorrow. GFE's Hadong District.
The 2024 U.S. presidential election takes place precisely 1 week from today, that is on November 5th, and it's looking to be a close contest, with the latest poll showing that the race is too close for comfort for all involved. We have details on this edition of Press Perspective. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective, our daily panel session with members of the press as well as pundits on occasion regarding issues of interest largely pertaining to South Korea and its neighbors. It's Tuesday, October 29th here in South Korea, and I'm Min Sun-hee. Today we address the broader consequences of the U.S. presidential election for its partners, including South Korea. For more, I have Kelly Kasulis-Cho for the Washington Post, that is. Kelly, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
I also have Fabian Kretschmer for German press agency. Fabian, it's a pleasure.
Hello, happy to be here.
Kelly, we will start with you. Let's begin with some details about the results of the most recent presidential polls. Who appears to be leading the race?
Well, it really depends on which poll you're looking at. We at the Washington Post do a daily analysis of about 70 national polls. If you look at the individual polls, it'll go for either Harris or Trump, sometimes with only a 1% difference. So that's how close we're talking here. Our analysis of all 70 suggests that Harris is currently in the lead, with the caveat that polling data doesn't always actually match public sentiment, and it is so close that you can't really use that as a predictor right now. She's ahead in 4 out of 7 battleground states as of today, but again, it's fluctuated so much that it's really hard to say.
Right, you mentioned the battleground states, and Kelly, in coverage of the U.S. presidential election, we often hear the phrase swing state, battleground states. For the sake of our viewers here in this part of the world, could you tell us what swing states or battleground states are? Which are these 7 states, such states that is, this time around, and why are they so important?
Okay, so this is a bit complicated, and even for Americans, it can be really confusing. So we don't go by the popular vote in the United States. We go by electoral votes and something called the Electoral College. So basically, each candidate is trying to win the number of votes that are allocated to each state. It's a state-by-state race. So if, say in Texas, you get 50.1% of the popular vote, you get all of the electoral votes for that state. So it's kind of like a winner-takes-all situation, state by state. So when we say battleground states or swing states, we're saying states that are really on the edge and could go for either candidate. Pennsylvania, for example, in the last 2 elections went to one candidate by a 1 percentage point difference. So you're talking about a huge number of votes that could, win the presidency for someone. And we've seen in the past that even if you get the popular vote, you don't necessarily win the presidential election. As for the 7 swing states we have right now, it's Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. That's why you see a lot of attention from both candidates in those states.
Right. Fabian, now, understandably, not a lot has been shared about the foreign policies of these 2 presidential nominees because their priority, of course, are in domestic matters. But based on what has been shared thus far, which incoming administration do you believe might be a better option for South Korea, and why?
Yeah, actually, I find it quite sad that during the campaign, many issues were discussed, but foreign policy really not so prominently. But I would say I can give a recommendation because I remember still the Trump's first presidency very well. I used to live in South Korea at the time and also used to report about it. And that you could really see what a wild card Trump was. You didn't know what you could get. For example, in the first year, the tensions were very high between North and South Korea, and he was in my opinion, actively also escalating with a very aggressive rhetoric. Then the next year, there were even summits with Trump and Kim Jong-un, and then the negotiations between US and North Korea really fell apart spectacularly. So it was really from one extreme to the other. So right now, I would say, from a South Korean perspective, I would appreciate predictability. I would also want a president who would support the liberal order, who would support NATO, who would support the alliance between US and South Korea. And in that regard, I would say Kamala Harris is the better incoming president. And I mean, from Trump, we could also see that he made outlandish remarks regarding the security architecture here. He wants to push South Korea to pay more for the security, even said a quote where he compared South Korea to a money machine. I think that was really, disrespectful.
And what about for Europe, Fabien? Which administration do you suppose would serve better for Europe's interests?
So Europe has realized in the last years that we need a strong US also as a partner. Right now there are many crises in the world, many conflicts, and Biden, for example, has done a good job in supporting Ukraine against Russia. I think that would be one concern, that the US will continue its support towards Ukraine. In that regard, I must say Harris is definitely better, because Trump has threatened to completely cut off the funding for Ukraine. That is really quite dangerous. And the second big issue would be Europe wants free trade. And in that regard, both candidates would not be perfect. They want to introduce tariffs, but at least according to Trump's plans, he wants to give 20% tariffs on everything. That would be a catastrophe for many countries, especially Germany, which is depending on its exports. So in that regard, also Harris would be better. And for many young people, actually the biggest topic globally is the climate change. They're very concerned about environmental policy. And in that regard, the clear winner would be also Harris, because Trump really doesn't care about renewable energy, etc. So yeah, I think you know my recommendation.
Right. Kelly, speaking as a journalist stationed here in South Korea, what are the implications of the US election results perhaps on regional stability here, especially with tensions on the Korean Peninsula as well as, of course, those surrounding Taiwan?
I mean, certainly Harris might surprise us if elected, but I think this is really a race between the status quo and an individual who seems to want to shake up the status quo or maybe even sow some chaos. When you look at Harris and what she said about the Korean Peninsula or foreign policy in this region, it's honestly not that much, and I think that's an indicator that she would probably be very much in line with Biden, who has been very much in line with Obama on these issues. This is kind of the standard U.S. playbook in terms of backing up South Korean security, not really engaging in too much dialogue with the North without some concessions made ahead of time, whereas Trump has actually shown a very different record during his presidency, as Fabien mentioned, with, you know, creating a little bit of tension. I remember the days of fire and fury, I think back in 2017, when people were really worried, even here in Korea. I know some people were making plans for what felt like a faraway, you know, fear of war, but still, just to hear people speaking about it really seriously at that time, it was something that still sticks with me. And I think, you know, Trump, when it has come to Korean issues, has kind of had this playbook of creating tension and then coming in to fix said tension that has been created by his own bluster. So we saw that a little bit with North Korea, where he then came in, as Fabien mentioned, and had these summits. That was something that was very unprecedented at the time. With South Korea and the free trade agreement, we saw that he renegotiated it, and it, in essence, was almost exactly the same, but it came off as if he was, you know, creating a better deal for Americans. And so I think in terms of stability with Harris, there's not a lot of information there. I mean, quite frankly, the U.S. is dealing with such severe domestic issues that the average American voter is not really that concerned with North or South Korea and what her foreign policy may be. And with Trump, I think he's shown very populist and protectionist rhetoric, talking about you know, a 20% universal tariff on major trade partners, talking about renegotiating the trade agreement again. And, you know, I think he's made some comments about Kim Jong-un, the North Korean leader, recently, and it's clear that it would be advantageous to ratchet up those tensions a little bit.
Right, and speaking about Trump, Fabian, precisely, I believe, a week ago, U.S. magazine The Atlantic published an interview with former White House Chief of Staff John Kelly under the Trump administration, who claimed that Mr. Trump had once asserted to him that he needed, and I quote, the kind of generals that Hitler had. Now, Team Trump, that is, has since dismissed these remarks, denied them, that is. How do you respond?
Well, so I cannot verify or falsify if he indeed said that, but if it has happened, then I think it's outlandish. It's really, makes you angry and wonder what was going on in his mind that he said those things. But I mean, to me, it sounds credible because Trump has shown for several occasions a huge obsession with dictators, with authoritarian figures, and so I really wouldn't be too surprised if he did say that. I can only say that I'm happy that really the fundamentals of the US democracy have been resilient, and that even a person like Trump, who's clearly anti-democratic in some ways, that he could not change those institutions. So I really trust in the US democracy and hope that a person like Trump, who sometimes really says very dangerous things, if you are if you believe in democracy, then I think this is really not acceptable.
Right. Kelly, generally speaking, Mr. Trump's controversial comments, including the one about needing to have generals that Hitler had, such comments do not appear to have dissuaded the American voters from standing behind him. How do you care to explain this reality?
This is a tough one. I mean, there are books about this. This is the subject of a lot of philosophical debate. Political scientists have dedicated a significant amount of their career at this point to this question. I think it's a few things. One, the United States, maybe a little bit like South Korea, is so politically polarized at this moment that you know, depending on which side of the political spectrum you stand, you may feel that your candidate, whether it be Harris or Trump, represents your core values, and therefore it's hard to be swayed one way or another. I think this race has come to represent a situation in which Harris stands for things like abortion's rights, women's choice, gun control, and Trump's side has come to represent, for some people, Christian values, Second Amendment rights. And so when you have something where both candidates are representing such big, deep moral issues for people, if you stand on one end of the spectrum, you know, some curt remarks or even misogynist or racist remarks are not necessarily going to sway you, maybe, or maybe they're going to fuel your rage at that candidate. So it's tough. So I think, you know, politically speaking, they represent such different sides of the spectrum that it's hard to move people more towards the center. I also think we live in a world of misinformation right now, where people are, you know, hearing what they want to hear on their own social media echo chambers. There's been a lot of research about this. People don't trust traditional media as much as they used to, and so even if someone who, say, is voting for Trump or Harris is presented with facts that have been confirmed by journalists that maybe don't represent their values, they may not trust what they're being told. And so, I mean, all you have to do is really look at Fox News versus MSNBC, and you can see how different the information landscape is there. So why are voters or supporters of Trump not being swayed by things that he says? They might agree with the things that he says. They might believe that the media narrative that's being crafted around what he says is meant to hurt him and is manipulative. They might feel like they don't like what he says, but he represents values that are really resonating with their core, that are so different from values on the left that they just simply can't imagine a situation where they vote for the left, and vice versa. So I compare it to South Korea because I do think that South Korea is in a little bit of a similar point. Politically, the countries are very different, but you're dealing with a situation where the left and the right are just so far apart, and moderates these days are not as common.
Right. Fabian, do you suppose the Trump administration may serve to perhaps encourage cooperation within countries and among governments as they seek to perhaps set up some kind of unity against Mr. Trump's foreign policy tendencies?
I don't think it works like this. I mean, the US is so important that you just have to deal with the reality. So even if Trump is not your preferred candidate, I mean, you get used to it, you do the best out of it. And the general trend that other countries collaborate with each other, democracies who share similar values, for example, my hometown Germany and South Korea, that's a trend that will happen anyway, and that is already happening, no matter if Harris or Trump will be the president. And when you mention it, for example, when I talk to European diplomats here in Seoul or in Beijing, and I ask them why, for example, Germany does not get even closer with the US, I think one reason why countries like Germany are a little bit cautious is because they know, yeah, soon Trump could be in the White House, and he's not seen as the most reliable partner. So we have to keep all doors open, so to speak. So, of course, this has an effect on the foreign policy, whether Trump or Harris will be there. But I think in general, we see this trend that there's a bloc building, almost similar to the Cold War, that you have authoritarian regimes on one side collaborating closer, and then you have democracies who are also getting closer together.
Right. Kelly, the US presidential election, as we spoke earlier, it's too close for comfort for both the Democrats and the Republicans. That being said, what do you suppose are the risks of perhaps another storming of the US Capitol, similar to the one we witnessed back in 2021 when Trump supporters were upset, to say the least, about Mr. Trump's defeat?
Well, first of all, what happened in January 6th, the Capitol riots, was truly unprecedented in a lot of ways in American history. I would imagine that someday my children might read about it in a history textbook in high school or something like that. So it's hard to say whether or not something of that magnitude would happen again. I mean, on a literal level, I'm sure there will be heightened security, and that this has set a new precedent for what we might be able to expect. I think that, there's been overwhelming evidence to suggest that, the election was not rigged in 2020. There's no proof that it was, but there are still people that believe that, again, because we talked about things like misinformation, distrust in establishment media or mainstream media, echo chambers on social media. And so whether or not people are going to amass and storm the Capitol if Trump is not elected or if he is elected, I don't know. I do think that we sit in a very different place than we did in 2020. For instance, I mean, there's been several people who have been arrested, tried, and convicted at this point for their involvement in the Capitol riots. Trump himself has been mired in very serious legal trouble because of this. So we know that this is possible, but there's also very serious, heavy legal consequence. There's even been people who have recanted their support of the president now that they've been, or the former President Trump, now that they've been in legal trouble. It's hard to say if they anticipated something like that happening to them. I think there's probably going to be more wariness from people who might be thinking about acting this way. At the same time, though, people might be more passionate and double down on what they believe in. I really don't know. It's impossible to forecast. I do think that what happened set a new precedent for what we can prepare for in an election, and this is why it was such a big deal in the United States, because we've never really had a situation in modern times where we've thought about, the Capitol being overthrown by rioters before.
Right. Then against the backdrop of this cloud of uncertainty as we wait for the result of the US presidential election next week, Fabien, what would be some of the diplomatic priorities for the incoming administration, especially keeping in mind the current climate of geopolitical tensions?
Well, that's clear to answer. I think China is really the big story that is the issue that the US has focused all its attention. I mean, already under Obama, the US has shifted or pivoted from Europe to the Indo-Pacific region. And, China is the world power which can challenge the position of the US. It has huge implications. Also, China is a world power that threatens to use a military force against Taiwan, possibly. So in case a conflict would happen there, that would be catastrophic. It would be an economic Armageddon. And because the trade route is very important, the whole international order has a great interest that there is a stability, and that also the US and China manage their consequences manage their differences in a really orderly way and will not escalate into an open conflict. And then, of course, there are other issues like Ukraine, Middle East, and of course Korea. I think from the Korean perspective, it's really important not to be forgotten, to still get a lot of attention by the US, because after all, the US will deliver security and, if it's done in a good way, also stability here on the Korean Peninsula.
Right, especially amid speculation of a potential 7th nuclear test by North Korea right after the US election. All right, Fabian, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. And Kelly, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, the US election takes place on November 5th, and following its result, we'll delve into the diplomatic and trade policies of the incoming administration in our panel sessions next week. In the meantime, tomorrow we have Hallyu Highlights.
Completely new. But something anyone can relate with.